Welcome to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, the podcast for high achievers who want to stay sharp, focused, and full of energy despite their diagnosis. With your host, National Board Certified Functional Medicine Health Coach, Julie Michelson, where Julie helps you take your power back from autoimmunity. And now here's your host, Julie Michelson.
Welcome back to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity show. I'm your host, Julie Michelson, and today we're joined by Shawn Borup, founder of Show Me Healthy Living, and we're talking about food as fuel and the healing power of single ingredient whole foods. From what to avoid to what to include, Shawn guides us on how to make the dietary changes that will allow us to all feel our best and share our gifts with the world. Shawn, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Julie. I'm just so pleased to be here.
I'm so excited for our conversation today. I didn't share with you that I grew up, my stepfather had a restaurant. It was really 3 restaurants in one. So I didn't realize that created a passion for food back then. I can connect those dots now. So I love just the passion, the wisdom, the expertise that you're bringing for the audience today. And we were chatting before I hit record. I will do my best to stay on task because I have so many areas I want to talk to you about. But first, I want to know, how did you get passionate about this? How did you get so involved in helping people eat healthy?
Yeah, I grew up a really sickly child. I had severe asthma, and I felt like I was sick all of the time. And then when I started having my own children, and then they had issues starting to show up, I remember going to a birthday party with my daughter, and because she had asthma so bad too, every time she ate all of the things that everyone else was eating, then her symptoms would get worse and we would pay the price. So once I learned how to get refined sugar out, I remember making her very special cupcake, and we would go to parties, and I took it out of my bag when it was, time to celebrate the birthday. And the mom sitting next to me said, what is that? And I said, this is a cupcake that my daughter can eat that doesn't make her sick. And so that, that reminds me of when she was a few years before that. I was sitting in the rocking chair one night about 3 a.m., giving her another breathing treatment, and just thinking to myself, I wonder if there's a better way. And then that thought just kept reoccurring, and until it was, I know there's got to be a better way, and I'm going to find it. I was so scared, watching her little face and her lips turn blue. And because that took me back, because I remember as a child not being able to breathe. Right. And I was in the hospital. I was in an oxygen tent, and there was a zipper on the side where my parents could put their hand in and hold my hand. And I remember looking up and to the side, and all I could see was plastic. Yeah. And I just wanted to go home. And it was really, really hard as a child, not understanding why I was sick. And my earliest recollection is when I was about 18 months old. That was back in the day when parents could not stay overnight with your child. And I remember standing in the crib screaming, "Mommy, mommy," and watching my mom walk away. And then the door closed. And so when people ask me why I do what I do, that's just a little background of the things that, the journey that I've had and with my own kids. And the miracle of it all, Julie, is when we started focusing on the food, which was like a foreign concept to me, because, my mom, bless her heart, she did the best she could. Yeah. But she just did not know. I was just raised on the standard American diet. We had a small little garden. I grew up in Las Vegas, Nevada. So we had a small little garden in the backyard, and we grew carrots and some lettuce, but I mean, it was very minimal. And when I was growing up, I mean, it was all about canned food. Frozen foods were, big, like the TV dinners were just, coming. They were just popular, all of that. And so we, as a family, and we just ate the standard American diet. And so had never considered that food. And then as a sick child, I went on so many antibiotics that my entire immune system was so compromised all the time, because it was a chronic, round the, it was a cycle, right? That you get on, and you feel like you're in this hamster wheel and you can't get out.
Yeah.
And so it was such a miracle to see that shift when we changed our food, when we got, things out of our diet that were making us sick, and we put things in that our body really needed, like the right kind of fuel. The way I teach kids is, would you ever go to the gas station and fill up your tank with gasoline? And it's an obvious answer, but it helps them to understand that there is certain fuel for certain things, and when we don't use the right fuel, it's just like, I remember one time one of our boys put diesel in fuel in his car, right? And then he's calling dad, hey, the car won't start. Same kind of concept. Like, when we understand as humans what food is really truly fuel, it's like a whole new world opens up. And in working with chronic health conditions, why food is, there's so many other parts of the puzzle, but food is such a big piece, because we do it multiple times every single day.
Absolutely. And I love the food as fuel is one of the biggest mindset shifts that I help people, step into, because that's not usually how they show up at my door. Food is soothing, food is everything but fuel. And we definitely, we need that fuel. Which leads me to my where I want to start. So often talk about hamster wheels. What you mentioned standard American diet, which is full of high carbs, processed grains, sugars, bad fats, all of it. But I want to start with just the simplest to understand, to just carry the fuel theme, is this sugar addicted piece of the standard American diet. And that cycle of, in theory, glucose is fuel. It's a fuel our body can use. And I'm not talking about, when we produce glucose because we have a stress response, or, so I try not to do the whole, like, all sugar is evil, but we get into this inflamed, addicted cycle. And as you know, when most people find me, they're exhausted. Fatigue is such a big part of the autoimmune experience, no matter the diagnosis.
Right.
So let's start with sugar, and why is that something we decided we wanted to talk about today?
Yeah, I started a Facebook group years ago called Sweet Life Without Sugar, because I knew from my own experience and what I had gone through with my own children, and just talking with people and how much they struggle with it, is that is, and personally, that was the first thing we did. So when I started this journey, the first thing I did was I removed refined sugar and refined flour from my kitchen. And it was we just no longer brought it in. If there was a treat to be, eaten, it was out of the house, because if it's in your kitchen, you're just, you're going to go automatically to that. Like the brain just fires up when it sees a package of Oreos. I don't know how else to explain it. That's why, all of these types of, whether it's sugar or high fructose corn syrup or corn syrup solids, or, all of these different types of sugar, which by the way, there's over 80 different names, and there's so many of them used today that people don't even know that are sugar.
True.
That it is, that's maddening, because the way that food is marketed today is they're very, very clever. There's a lot of trickery out there. And if we have time, maybe we'll talk a little bit just about tips for navigating through a grocery store, because that is so overwhelming. I remember the first time going with my, my new shift to my new lifestyle and reading labels for the first time. I mean, actual ingredients.
Yes,
and
the label on the back, not
everything was, oh, got to put that back. Oh, got to put that back. I mean, that's what I felt like. It was a high level of frustration, but just to make it simple, the first thing I did was I got rid of white sugar and I got rid of white flour. Why white flour? People think of white flour as, well, that's in breads and, those type of things. Unfortunately, and even wheat flour. And this is another trickery that I'll just teach your listeners. If you don't see the word whole in front of the word wheat, then you are eating white flour that has been colored with a caramel coloring, which, it just makes insult to injury, right? That much worse. So I removed those things from my kitchen, which, you use this flour, right, to make pancakes, biscuits, whatever, you use it for multiple things. And so unfortunately, what happens, white flour or just regular wheat flour, they have taken the bran and the germ out of that grain, out of that product, because those are the things that have a shorter shelf life. And of course, we know that for food manufacturers, it's all about the money. And so they can't have their product going bad. It has to be able to, be transported hundreds of miles, if not thousands, and then sit on the shelf. And then it has to still look good, taste good, smell good, everything when you bring it home and, to be in your cupboard. So that's what's left in this flour is just the starch. And if you are if you used white glue in grade school, like I did, the paste, okay, that is basically flour and water, okay?
No wonder kids used to eat it.
Yeah, right? Exactly. But that's what it is. It is a sticky glue. And so what happens is we have to remember that in our gut, about 80% of our immune system lives in our gut, and we have 30 to 35 feet. I mean, wrap your head around that. 30 to 35 feet of intestines that our food has to travel through. So if we're eating a lot of white flour or wheat flour, that is all this starch that it turns to glue, it is sticking in our intestines, it gets stuck, and that is creating an environment for a swamp. And in swamps, that's where infections live, right? And so there is, it's just when you get educated and just understand just some basics of what is in some of the basic foods that are used, just overused in today's traditional diet, then you kind of can understand why we're seeing so much illness and so much, obesity and type 2 diabetes in young people, which, I mean, the list just goes on and on. You and I, we could talk about this forever, but anyways, that's the first thing that I did. And so how do you do that? I mean, that is hard. That is what, we do what we know. We have a comfort cycle, right? Of the way we do things in our life for breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks. And, we know that as humans, we are creatures of habit. And so changing habits is a definite shift. And if we don't see any benefit in changing that habit, then we don't have the motivation to keep that habit going. And so that, it takes just a little bit of patience. And that's why I always tell people, don't beat yourself up. You just go forward. You do the best you can every single day. And you try to do, it's in all areas of our life, we try to be, I just say 1% better. Like, just let me be 1% better today of a human being, in
atomic
all
habits.
areas.
Yep.
So anyways, what did I do? How did I change that? So I started using local raw honey. And why local raw honey? Because when we eat honey that is local and raw means it's been unheated. Because typical honey, like in the Bear little plastic bottle that's really thin and in this really light color, unfortunately that honey's been heated. And so all of the enzymes that are naturally in that honey have been destroyed. And why are those enzymes important? Well, it's those enzymes that help in the digestion of every cooked food that we eat. So just think about what you ate yesterday. How much cooked food did you eat? Did you eat any raw food at all? The average American doesn't eat any vegetables, and the vegetables that they eat are potatoes and ketchup. So, it's pretty sad, but because our bodies need these enzymes. They are very, very important in our body's production of amino acids. Again, we create, we make amino acids. Those are the building blocks of protein. And, there's just so many reasons why we need to eat live food, right? One ingredient food. And so I switched to local raw honey, and also because it's local, you can get a lot of benefit to seasonal allergies, pollens that come, your body, in other words, gets the nourishment that it needs so that you don't go into, have these overreactions, as the seasons change. So eating local honey, and, I teach the kids at the YMCA, and I will hold up this container of honey and ask them to read where this honey is from. And they will say Montana. And I said, is Montana close to where we live? And they'll all kind of start laughing. Yes, we live in Montana. But I want them to appreciate, if everyone was sourcing their food, close to where they live, we would be so much healthier. We would feel so much better on a day-to-day basis. But so going back to sugar, so local raw honey was a sweetener that I used. But I also started noticing that there were foods like bananas, butternut squash, beets, and carrots, like all these real foods that are naturally sweet. And do you know that you can make a wonderful brownie with butternut squash as most of the sweetener? I mean, I just started a little bit, again, slowly at a time. We got rid of our pancake mix, right? That was already done for us. And I started using oats, and I would put the oats in the blender and make a coarse flour. And we started making oatmeal pancakes. And instead of buying Mrs. Butterworth's and Aunt Jemima maple syrup that we had grown up on, which, by the way,
not
is
maple syrup.
2%. Yeah, 2% maple syrup.
I went to a log cabin family, and boy, was I sad when I found out that wasn't maple syrup either.
I know, right? And so the other 98%, just for listeners, that is made up of two things: sugar and chemicals. That's what's in there.
Of course, we're even worse. I would say even worse: corn syrup and chemicals.
Is exactly. And I'm not sure when high fructose corn syrup or corn syrup first was the craze, and then they figured out that high fructose corn syrup was, hey, a whole bunch sweeter and cheaper and faster to make than regular corn syrup. So they switched to that, which, we have seen a rise in children's ability to pay attention. They're, just all of this stuff shows up: irritability,
chronic illness, autoimmunity, all of it. It all connects.
And so
my listeners are probably laughing right now because they're like, is she telling us to eat whole wheat flour? Julie's always saying gluten-free, gluten-free, gluten-free if you have autoimmunity. Different thing. Right now we're focusing on real food and why the whole food is so much different than the processed parts.
Exactly.
And I want that butternut squash brownie recipe from you, because for the first, I can't even believe the abundance of butternut squash we have growing right now. We never planted it before, and it has literally taken over my yard, and I'm so excited.
And here's another thing I do that I love to do with butternut squash is I actually make a sauce, a cheese sauce for either, and most of the time, going back to, gluten-free, most of the time I just naturally eat that way. And,
Right.
but I make a cheese sauce that is, the main ingredient is butternut squash, and to go on either, zucchini noodles or some brown rice noodles. And it tastes amazing. It's an amazing, like, macaroni and cheese sauce, if you will.
Wow.
I'm glad you brought up the wheat and the, not eating gluten, because I just want to touch on that for a minute, just to give everyone a little bit of education. So once upon a time, the way that wheat was grown was, they would hand cut it, right? And so when they hand cut it, then it would lay on the field overnight, and it would begin to sprout, and before it was taken in and processed. And so then so there was already a lot of nutrients already in that food. And this is a whole nother topic that I'd be grateful to come back and talk about, was what is the point of sprouting and soaking and all of these things that used to happen back in the day. And all of a sudden today we have all of these stomach issues. And so it's like, I can't have beans, I can't have gluten, the list goes on. And a lot of it is in how we prepare that food. First, it goes back to the soil and what's happened to our soil, how food is grown, but then it's that whole process thing. So just focusing on wheat here, today's wheat is, they have added in more gluten on purpose for years. And the reason why is because it makes it easier to use.
In this country. They've done it in the United States.
Yes.
And that's the important, how do we know? Because people travel elsewhere that have quote unquote gluten sensitivity and even celiac, and they can enjoy wheat in other countries. They can enjoy
wheat, exactly. So I myself have experienced some, bloating and just from just really uncomfortable stomach things when I have just eat regular wheat. And so I stopped it completely, just to stop the bleeding, right? And then I experimented. I got some einkorn wheat. Einkorn is an ancient wheat that was grown, like wheat should be grown. But it is, you have to look for it today. It's not going to be at your grocery store or on your grocery store shelf. But einkorn wheat is the type of wheat that always used to be around. In other words, it has lower gluten, it has lower starch, it's easier to digest, all of these things. And then I soak and sprout it, and I make sourdough. And I am happy to say that I am able to consume that type of wheat. But yeah, as far as any other wheat out there, I have a picture of a hamburger bun that came from a fast food restaurant. And this man put it in one of those cases that, you put professionally signed basketballs or footballs to protect it. He put this hamburger bun in this case and he left it there. And he looked at it every year. Well, guess what? 9 years later, it still looked exactly the same as it did the day he bought it. And that, my friends, is not real food. And that is the type of wheat that is so chemically laden with not real food. And so that's why that bun can look that way. That is why we have so much gluten sensitivity today, and just issues with it, because they have gone and hybridized all of our wheat and changed it to the point, and then put it in everything, right? It's like in so many things that we eat on a daily basis. And so we have our bodies have just get to a point where they're like, hey, we can't filter all the toxins in this food out, because we're constantly taking it in. And so I'm glad you brought that up, because so many people, especially if you have an autoimmunity, that's one of the first things you're going to stop eating to feel better.
Well, and to heal, even if you don't notice. I mean, that's for me, I joke, every diet should be individualized. But the one thing to avoid if you have autoimmunity would be gluten, because of the impact it has on the gut and leaky gut. I want to highlight two things. One thing that you said when talking about this experiment, if you will, with the hamburger bun, you said, which is so important for listeners to hear like 100 times, the body doesn't recognize it as food. And it's not just gluten, it's all of this processed food that we're talking about. Is we're creating an immune response when we're eating things that aren't recognized as food. It's a foreign intruder, and your body is supposed to fight those. And so this is why you mentioned eating live food. You mentioned eating single ingredient food, which is what I would call real food. Because it's loaded with nutrients and enzymes and things that we need and can use, and B, it's not sending off alarm bells all the time. And I don't want to dive too deep because there's so many other things I want to talk about, but since we opened the wheat and gluten door, and you alluded to it as well, the GMO issue with the wheat that we get in this country is huge. And I don't know the answer. Is it really because we have higher gluten content in our wheat, or is it because it's loaded with glyphosate and we're adding in just exorbitant amounts of other toxins, which again is illegal in other countries. And
Exactly.
So it's hard you can't separate it out at this point.
No, you can't, Julie. And I really think it's what you just said. Is it one or the other, or both? And I really believe it's both. I think it is. They were already changing our wheat. And then now all of a sudden they're dumping glyphosate. The reason why they use glyphosate so much is it dries the grain out faster so they can get their product to the shelf faster, because it's all about the money. Again, they care nothing about our health. And so glyphosate is, again, when bugs consume that, literally it splits their stomach open. And if that tells you what it does to them, what is it doing to the human microbiome? Yeah. And, you and I were talking about this earlier about we have to create the environment where our immune system can be strengthened. And then after we create that environment, like you said, from removing these things that are causing us symptoms, like gluten, for instance, we remove these foods first, and then we're trying to create this environment where we can strengthen our immune system. And then we have to replenish constantly to keep this environment in where it is, so that when the bad guys invade us, I always teach people we have two teams that live in our gut. We got the bad guys and the good guys, and which team are you feeding? You can just go down if you're eating a lot of acidic food, if you go from coffee to gluten-free donut to if you're eating gluten-free processed food, you're probably still experiencing a lot of symptoms. Sure. And it's because they've figured out a way to make it gluten-free, but to still fill it full of additives and fillers and preservatives that your body, again, going back to that, it can't recognize it as food. So your body's like, what am I going to do with this? It will store it for a period of time until then something happens where it's going to try to push it out. And then that's when symptoms show up. And, we have to remember, we have 5 major organs of elimination, and, inflammation is constantly being built in our system when our organs of elimination are not working, our colon. So that's the first thing. So when people come to me and they've got skin eruptions and they wonder what they're eating that's making this rash or this bump or whatever, then I go back and my first question is, are you pooping? They just kind of look at me like, are you pooping every day? And because I've had some people say, well, my doctor said that pooping 3 or 4 times a week is just my normal. And I just want to fall over because that is not normal. That is common today. And we are even, giving children laxatives and medication to make them poop. That is just wrong. Because again, we've taken out so much of the fiber. Processed food is taking out the fiber because, like I was explaining before, the germ and the bran of any grain or the skin, like we dig into a potato, we don't eat the skin, or the apple, we just buy apple juice or apple sauce. And the problem is and then we wonder why our blood sugar still spikes, right? For example, it's because at least half of the fiber is in the skin or right underneath the skin of all fruits and vegetables. And so where possible, we need to consume that skin so that we can get the fiber that we need. But we, as Americans, we are getting half or less of the recommended amount of fiber,
which is
and
low.
I believe that is one of the things that drives chronic illness, leads to autoimmunity, is that we have, our bodies again cannot recognize all of this foreign food, and so we're not, our organs of elimination are not working. So just to go back and finish, that your colon is your first one. Like, you should be eliminating about 2.5 pounds of toxins every day through your colon. And next would be your skin. Your skin is your largest organ of your body. And so your skin is also, that's why it's good to, that's why exercise is so important, so that we can sweat. And, it's not just about getting your heart rate up. Like, you need to be sweating too, even if it's for a short period of time. Your skin, if your skin's working right. And when people tell me they have a rash, I'm like, that's terrific, because that means that your other organs of elimination are working well enough to kick it out. That just means, because after your skin comes your lungs are next, then your kidneys, and then your lymphatic system. So Julie, so many people that come to you, their problems are all the way in your lymphatic system. So that tells you their kidneys, their lungs, their skin, and their colon are overworked, and they are not keeping up. And so that's one of the things that is very helpful for us to understand about how our body works. Like, when symptoms do show up, like, we need to take care of these organs, that because they're all one big family, they all work together. So when one is affected, it's eventually going to affect another, and then another. And that's why what Julie and I do, it's not about, it is about treating symptoms, but it's really not. The end goal is to create the right environment where the body can heal itself and do what it's supposed to do. And in order to do that, we have to look at what we're putting on our fork, every single day. It really does matter. And I don't mean you have to be perfect at it. I don't want to say that. I'm just saying it does matter. And so it's worth putting the right kind of fuel in our body, because when we do, then we sleep better, we poop better, we feel better. And then everyone has a gift to share. That's why I tell people, you have so much to give to make this world a better place. And when you feel like crap, you can't give your best. It just doesn't happen.
So well said. And that is why we do what we do, so that everybody can share their gifts. And we know, nothing happens in a void. So when you were sharing your journey about, taking sugar out, you were like, oh, but I can use, local raw honey. And not only am I getting this, some of the sweet that I want, but you found a way to do it that's full of enzymes, helping boost your immune system, all the good things. And we don't have enough time to dive deep, but I want to touch on, we're talking about removing, and sometimes what someone needs to remove, at least temporarily, is a healthy, nutrient dense vegetable. It just depends on how far down the road they are, how many sensitivities they have, which is that's a whole nother topic. But most with autoimmunity, by the time they know they have autoimmunity, we know they already have leaky gut, and therefore, if they've tried to move away from the standard American diet and are including a lot of really good things, they may have some sensitivities to those really good things. But not just what we're keeping out. You mentioned that we all have the good bugs, the bad bugs, and that's okay. That's good. You're never going to get rid of all the bad bugs. But just by creating this void doesn't mean that you're going to get that balance of good bugs that you want. And I know that the fermentation is a specialty of yours. And I want you to, if there's a way to kind of briefly introduce listeners to fermentation and why this is so important for our gut health and our overall health.
Yeah, I would love to. So how I got into fermentation is that my own gut crashed, and it was as a result of some emotional trauma. And so, I don't want to dismiss things that are going on in our life. Like we all have stress. If you're breathing, you have stress.
Yes.
And we have good stress, we have bad stress. And we may not realize that emotional trauma can physically like really tear our health down. And that's what happened to me. And so like digestion just stopped, like everything stopped working in me. I couldn't even hold down water. And I got real, this was several years ago.
Wow.
And so of course that, you know, being the foodie that I was like, okay, I've got to figure this out and fix it. And so I discovered fermented foods, and I slowly rebuilt back my my gut. You know, my gut bacteria was just not balanced. And again, if you are experiencing sugar cravings is a number one sign that you have an unbalanced environment in your gut. And Hippocrates said all disease begins in the gut. And so I add to his statement that means all healing begins in the gut. And so fermented foods, the magic of them is that this good team of guys that we have, you picture the sword and the breastplate, right? And the shield and everything, that is our good guys. And they are there to fight off the bad guys. And if, like Julie said, we do need a balance, but we just need more good guys and less bad guys. And unfortunately, the standard American diet creates exactly the opposite: more bad guys, and fewer good guys. So what fermented foods do is they basically give our good guys the fuel that they need to replenish, because they need replenishing like every 24 hours. And so, and you'll hear the word prebiotics, that has kind of showed up in the past few years. And they're foods like onions and garlic and apples. Those all contain prebiotics. And the prebiotics are food for the probiotics, and they all work together to so that these good guys are strong enough so that when viruses do come by, we're all going to catch viruses. It's just a fact of life. We are going to, our bodies have the need to cleanse and to flush out toxins. And but when that happens, what's great about having a good environment that we've been talking about in our gut, and fermented foods is one of those things that if we're eating them on a daily basis, we're constantly replenishing what these good guys need to keep this environment strong and stable. Because again, we're all exposed, whether it's through the air and the water and our food, or, just the environment, and we're all exposed to toxins. And the body is a miracle machine. It knows exactly what to do with those and how to get them out. But when so many of our major organs are overloaded and they can't keep up that toxic load, that's when symptoms manifest and we don't feel good, whether it's a headache or it's something really, really severe with autoimmune disease where it affects our daily life. And so things like yogurt and kefir and sauerkraut, other fermented veggies. What's so great about sauerkraut is I will make like a half a gallon jars at a time, and I'll make several of them, and they will stay for I would say almost a year in my refrigerator. So I can make a whole bunch at a time, and then it's done for months, right? And you just need a forkful. I know a lot of people that pay a lot of money every month to take a probiotic. But a forkful of my sauerkraut, which is literally pennies a day, talk about eating on a budget, it has more probiotics in that forkful than this $70, $80 a month probiotic pill. But there's little things, that we need to understand about, fermentation. And if you overeat it, then it will cause symptoms as well. So it's all about, just your body, your gut just needs a little bit. But making homemade yogurt, the first time I made homemade yogurt, Julie, I was kicking myself because it was so simple and it took so little hands-on time, because then the yogurt, that's what's so beautiful about fermentation is you do a little bit of prep, anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour of putting this together. And then it does all of the work after that. And you just wait. And the same thing with yogurt and kefir. And, but I was kicking myself because it was such a simple process. And I was thinking, why didn't I start doing this 20 years ago?
Yeah, it's intimidating, and
it is intimidating
because I'm me and I can't help it. I'll throw out there, you can use you can make coconut yogurt. It doesn't
yes, you
have
can.
to be,
And I
doesn't have to
I
be dairy based.
Yep, you can make non-dairy yogurt.
Yep.
You can make non-dairy cheese. And that's why I started my company, Julie, which is Show Me Healthy Living, because you can go on and watch a video on how to do something, but chances of you actually carrying that through and taking action are not very probable, because we all have good intentions and then life takes over. So I'll just tell you, one of my favorite experiences was with a mom and her 8-year-old daughter in Northern Ireland. They were in their kitchen. I was in mine in Montana. And this little girl could not have eggs, and she could not have dairy. And of course, she could not have gluten. Well, together, the three of us made a cauliflower pizza crust with non-dairy cheese and a flax egg. And to see this little girl's face light up was just magical. It was a magical moment.
And that's why you do this, right?
That's why I do this. Yep. And this little girl was able to have pizza. And so there are ways around every food sensitivity to still eat real food.
Absolutely.
And so you can go from the SAD diet, which is what I call the standard American diet, to the real American diet, which is the RAD diet. And that's possible for everyone, no matter what illness, chronic illness you are dealing with, or food sensitivities. And that is the beauty about, eating real food, is that we can experience that. Like, we can feel that rush of energy from real food, rather than that drop of energy that happens when we eat something that's processed and then our blood sugar caves after a short amount of time. And
that's a great point for something listeners can pay attention to. If you eat lunch and then you want a nap, there's a clue. If you eat anything, fill in the blank. I want to circle back to the yummy fermented foods for people who aren't ready to dive in and make yogurt or sauerkraut. Do you have some tips for listeners if they're like, oh, that's not even part of my diet. I'm not ready to jump in and make it. What can they be looking for to make sure that they're actually getting the probiotics and the things that we're talking about?
Great question. So we'll start with sauerkraut. So there's a lot of, I remember sauerkraut when I was growing up, and it was just in the little plastic bag, in the store, and it just looked gross to me. I wouldn't even, look at it. Number one is when cabbage and, which is the base of your sauerkraut, when that is put in plastic, whether it's a plastic jar, plastic bag, that actually damages a lot of the probiotics, if not all of them. So you want to look for sauerkraut that is in a glass jar. So that's number one tip. And then you want to look for the word raw, because if it's not raw and unpasteurized, then the pasteurization process will also damage, if not kill off, all of the good probiotic bacteria, which again, we have over 100 trillion, cells, but we have more bacteria than we do cells. And so that's why this bacteria is so important in our gut. And that's what fermented foods, any kind of probiotic food is what I call them, anything that's cultured, that is going to go in and help balance out all of the other foods that we eat that cause so much acidity. And it's the acidity in our foods, a lot of it, that will, that's what feeds these bad guys and makes them stronger. And so, you want to look for, it's in a glass jar, it's raw and unpasteurized. That's when, and then my third thing it would be to try to find it at your local farmer's market, where it's made right where you live. And like, I even have some stores here in Montana that I can go to that are an hour away. So it's an hour drive, but they have local, raw, unpasteurized sauerkraut. And kimchi. Kimchi is like a spicy version of sauerkraut.
Korean sauerkraut. It's
right.
delicious.
And you just have to watch out because sometimes they do add sugar. But here's the thing, in fermentation, they eat all of the sugars out, which is another thing that happens in kefir. So you may be, if you're lactose intolerant or you can't, eat dairy, kefir may actually work really well with you. Again, it's something that is very individual. We are all individual. And so you have to try that food out on yourself. But that is the beauty of culturing food, of fermentation, is it goes in and it eats all the sugars and it eats all the starches. And remember, starches turn to sugar, right? That's why white flour or any kind of flour, it's so important to get it out of your kitchen because it turns to sugar in a very short amount of time and goes into the bloodstream, so it gives you the same type of reaction as your body does to sugar. And so that's the beauty. So for fermented foods, those are my suggestion. As far as cultured foods like yogurt and kefir, yes, they do make some that are dairy free. And the only thing you have to really watch out is what additives or fillers are going in there. Today, gums, all kinds of xanthan gum, guar gums, the list goes on.
And even worse, carrageenan.
Carrageenan, is a horrible
going for texture.
Hormone disruptor. It disrupts all of your good guys. It creates an unbalanced gut. So you really have to look at those. And remember, on your ingredient list, what is listed at the very top, that is the most that's in that food. And then it goes down from there. So if you're seeing something at the very end, although that's still not a good ingredient, at least it's not towards the top. So that is just another tip for reading ingredient labels. But for me, if I see it on there at all, carrageenan or any of these fillers, it's just going back on the shelf. You guys, I make homemade almond milk in 8 minutes, and that includes cleaning my blender. Okay, so 8 minutes. Hands-on time. It is I just tell myself, you have no excuse for buying almond milk at the store that they have to put additives in, or whether it's almond milk or oat milk or any of these milks, these plant-based milks that are popular today. I'm finding that a lot of people are still having symptoms show up, and it's because again, like we talked about earlier, Julie, your body cannot recognize it if it's not a real food. And so it says, what are we going to do with this? And so it will store it for a time until there gets too much. And then that is when chronic illness and disease are going to show up, because these symptoms show up. And then we're wondering why we're sick. And it's because the body can only handle so much over time before it kind of, says enough is enough. And, that red light goes on, that alarm goes on, right?
Critical level.
Exactly. So as far as if you do eat dairy, you want to look for yogurt that is made from 100% grass-fed cows.
Absolutely.
You can also buy sheep yogurt. You can buy goat milk yogurt. But again, cows, and this is a whole nother conversation, but I'll just lightly say cows are raised today in an environment where they are given hormones to make them produce more milk and faster. Again, it's all about the money. These poor cows get sick. They get infections in their udders. And so they pump them through antibiotics. One of the things that has really been hitting me hard lately is that we take antibiotics when we are really sick and our body needs help. But 80% of all antibiotics today that are consumed are given to livestock. And so if you've got to re-listen to that, okay, 80% are given to livestock. That means all the meat and the dairy that we consume, much of that is full of antibiotics, and we are taking all of that into our own bodies. And then again, our bodies have to figure out what to do with it. And so you can kind of get a picture of why we are we live in such a toxic ridden society, everything we're trying to navigate. So you want to make sure if you're buying dairy yogurt or kefir, you always want to buy plain, never buy sweetened, because I don't care if it's
own stuff in it. Put your own
I don't
fruit.
care if it is honey, or even if it's honey, it is still way, way too much sugar. And that's another thing is, if you are vegan, of course, you're not going to eat honey. You want to make sure you substitute 100% maple syrup. It's still sugar, you guys. And so we want to minimize that. And maybe you can sweeten with real dates. There are other ways to do it, but you've got to look for, you've got to read on these containers how this food is processed. us, like how do they care for their cows? And that's another thing of, if you have access to a local dairy, go to the dairy, talk to them.
Yeah, see how the cows are living.
Yeah, get to know your local farmer.
Where I get meat that, like, I know where it grew up. Like we check it out, and that's the whole, you're eating whatever they ate as well.
Exactly.
We are way over time, and I don't want to keep you longer than promised, but I need to, as this is a trick question, because you've already given listeners so much to take action on. But if you had to pick either from what you've already said or something else, if they do one thing, what's one step listeners can do starting today?
Starting today, I would, take this one step is so important. And I know that some of you live with people that are really adamant about the things that they want to eat,
attached to their
food.
But
most of you are the head of the household, the mom or the dad that is listening to this conversation. Get refined sugar and refined flour out of your house and get more real one ingredient foods. Bring in more fruits and vegetables. Have a bowl of fruit sitting on the counter, because again, yes, there's sugar in that banana and that apple, but this is sugar that your body knows exactly what to do with. And it will actually give you, like we were talking at the very beginning, the body needs fuel. We need glucose. We need fuel for energy. Let's get it from the right food. So if that means taking it to your local food pantry, if it's something that's unopened, do that. If it means taking your 5 pound of white sugar and powdered sugar and putting it in the trash, do that. Whatever it takes, but just make a decision today that in your kitchen, you are going to use real food sugar and get away from this sugar that is going to not only destroy your gut bacteria, but it's going to exacerbate any chronic condition in your body. And so this is how you can, and again, remember, the generations coming after us, they're learning from us. They're watching what we do. So if we want them to be healthier, if we want them to have it really doesn't matter
lead by example.
The length of your lifespan. It is how well you're living in the time that you're here. Let's give that next generation the best gift we can give them by teaching them how to eat real food and why that matters.
I love that. Amazing. I knew you couldn't just do one thing. I love your one thing had like 5 things in it.
It does, because it's all related, but thank you for your patience. And again, Julie and I said, we could talk about this for hours.
All day. I know. And so, guys, just pick any of the amazing info that Shawn gave you and make that one. Start with one thing, like make that one up level that will lead you to a whole food, real food, single ingredient diet. So for those that listen on the go and aren't going to check the show notes, where's the best place to find you?
So my website is showmehealthyliving.com. And I will tell you, we're in the middle of a rebranding and revamping. So stay tuned for that. But you can go on my website at showmehealthyliving.com and just get on my email list so that you can receive my emails. I send out recipes and health tips on a regular basis. And then also my Facebook group is Sweet Life Without Sugar. I am live every Thursday night at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. And I show you how I clean out my fridge and have zero waste and great taste, because the average American family throws away about $2,000 worth of food every year. That is a nice vacation. And so I show you how to do that. And just to inspire you, we share things in the group about eating real food and what difference it makes in how we feel every day.
Amazing. Shawn, thank you so much for giving listeners so many actionable items and just a way to totally reset their health.
You're sure welcome, Julie. Thanks again. It was such an honor to be here with you today.
For everyone listening, remember you can get the show notes and transcripts by visiting inspiredliving.show. I hope you had a great time and enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I will see you next week.
Thank you for listening to Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity. Did you enjoy this episode? Please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to get a transcript of this and every other episode, just head on over to inspiredliving.show or click on the link in this episode's description. There, you can also find everything we discussed in this episode, including links and information about our guest. You can even send in your questions to be answered by Julie in a future episode. That's inspiredliving.show. Until next time, this is Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, helping you take your power back.